Good evening, everyone. My name is Matt Kirkpatrick, and I'm the District Director of Student Support Services in Middletown. We wanted to take the opportunity to thank you for coming out and joining us tonight in the first of what will be 6 parent sessions related to mental health, well-being, and social emotional learning. Tonight you have a real treat. We have Barbara Judge-Schnowski, who is going to be working in collaboration with Effective School Solutions to discuss mental health. She's going to be giving parents and caregivers tools that are related to communication and coping, and also help parents understand their child's behavior a little bit better. So we're glad that you came out tonight. We hope that you enjoy the presentation, and we hope that you come out for the remaining workshops that we're going to have over the next year and a half. So thank you very much. Barbara?
Thank you so much. Thank you for everyone here and for the district having myself here and Effective School Solutions here to speak to you today about the Nurtured Heart approach. I guess maybe with a show of hands, how many of you have heard about the Nurtured Heart approach before? Couple hands up. Right, so it's something that's been around for probably close to 2 decades. But it's becoming more and more well-known, this particular approach. It is an approach developed by Howard Glacier, and I'll get to him in a moment, and we'll talk about him in a moment. And it is a relationship-based approach for parents, caregivers, teachers, to help sort of channel the intensity of their child into a way that builds their inner wealth, their inner strength, and speaks to their greatness. But it's something that can be applied to all of us as well, adults included, not just to children. So I just wanted to say thank you to all of you for being here, speaking to your greatness and showing your dedication to growing as a parent and caregiver for your children. So thank you for being here. And this is just an introduction to the Nurtured Heart approach. The approach is a 6-hour-long training, and I'll get into some details at the end for those of you who'd like to learn more about it. So this is just a quick overview to sort of tap into some of the highlights and things that you can start to implement already with your children. And here is Howard Glacier, the founder of the Nurtured Heart approach. So just to give a little background about Howard, I am a Nurtured Heart approach trainer, and I actually was trained by Howard in the approach. He shared when he was younger, he was very, very skilled at getting himself into trouble, always getting in trouble, knowing how to push buttons. And he recognized that what he was really looking for was that connection with the adults around him. But his intensity was channeled in ways that continued to get him into trouble because he was rewarded for those times when he was misbehaving instead of behaving. Then he went on to sort of recognize this as a pattern as a licensed practicing counselor when he would go and work with other families and children, and he recognized that parents were trying really, really hard. They were doing everything that they've read, that they've seen on video, and still yet there was challenges with their children. What was happening here? But again, it sort of reflected back to his experience when he was younger, and he noticed this trend of the children wanting connection, but recognizing, or just sort of subconsciously recognizing that that connection happened when negative behaviors were happening. And we'll get into a little more detail about what exactly Howard meant there. But that's where the Nurtured Heart approach came from. It's sprung from Howard's own life experience, as well as his experience as a licensed practicing counselor working with families. It helps all children flourish. It's that idea of taking the intensity. So many times we associate intensity with something challenging, difficult, and it can be pathologized sometimes, the intensity, because the approaches that we have seem to not work, and it can be frustrating for us as parents, teachers, adults. How do we do this? How do we sort of connect with our child to help them flourish? So intensity is not the enemy. Intensity is a life force. If you think back to throughout history, to all the big names that we could think of, there was a lot of intensity with those figures throughout history, right? They were movers and shakers. These were not quiet people. Sometimes they went against the rules, right? So it's challenging, well, not challenging, but sort of in a way challenging ourselves to channel that intensity into a way that helps our child recognize their greatness instead of seeing it as something as a negative. And of course, children's behavior can be irritating, annoying, push us to the limits at times, right? They can be disrespectful, right? But also in the same token, there's very many wonderful qualities about them as well. So how do we go about growing those qualities we want to see develop, right? And improvement isn't enough. So this goes back to this concept that nurtured heart approach has, that improvement is something that's associated with the word temporary. It's a fix for a little while, right? But when we talk about nourishing the child's sense of greatness and them recognizing their ability to be successful and succeed at what they do, then this is more than just an improvement. This is a shift. This is a change. This is something that stays. And many times with intense children also, back to that idea of the behaviors can get pathologized. The Nurtured Heart Institute's take on medication is one that medication should be tried as a last approach and not a first approach. Sometimes, though, even with the best intent in channeling the intensity into a way that is nurturing to the child, there still might be medication that's needed to assist the child. So it's not saying that no medication ever, but perhaps why not try some new approach? Perhaps try the Nurtured Heart approach first and see if there is a shift before moving forward with medication. Again, we don't want to pathologize the child. We want to celebrate their intensity. And what we don't know can hurt us. Back to the idea of the methods that we've all learned, the strategies that we've all learned, the timeouts, the taking away of privileges at times, ignoring, and we'll get into it into a little more depth about how this can sort of backfire for us, some of these strategies that we implement as parents with our children. Because these strategies that have been studied and have been shown to be successful have been studied on children who basically do what they're supposed to do, kind of follow the rules, go along to get along, get along to go along. And it's not really studied on the child who sort of is more intense and pushes back and questions, right? And sort of has their own mindset as well. So some of those parenting strategies that we learn actually can escalate situations, which might be the experience that some of you may have had yourselves. So back to that idea of we want to build the inner well. So imagine, a lot of us know the Just Say No to Drugs program that's out there. It's a wonderful program, right? And there's many other programs that are out there. And they actually teach children experientially and provide them with information and strategies on how to say no, how to stand up for themselves. But real things happen in the world, right? And our children might be in situations where things might not be so cut and clear. So where do they draw those resources from, right? We want them to have that inner wealth, that inner strength. So when they say no, that's a place that's coming from them, that they are comfortable and recognize that they deserve good, that they deserve better in life, so that they recognize that they're doing this for themselves because they're worth it. We want you to feel like this approach is from the inside out, not only for your children, but for yourselves. It's about a different way of being, so to speak, a different way of connecting with your child. So kind of living it, breathing it, being it. There are 3 core stands, 3 core methodologies that the 3 stands are, and we'll get into them. It's very important that they're done in a particular order, sort of like setting the foundation. There's a lot more information about each of these stands. And again, just a reminder that today it's just an overview. The first stand is absolutely no. Now, when we say stand, it sounds resolute, right? We're firm, we take a stand, we're not budging, right? This is where we're at. We are not moving from this. First one is absolutely no. The second one is absolutely yes. And the third one is absolutely clear. So these are the 3 stands, the 3 tenets. We don't budge from these. They go particular order. This is the order they go in. And the first 2 are the foundation for the third one. We'll get into some detail about the first and second. The third one requires a little more training, but I'll let you know how you could get that as well. So up here we see Toys R Us, right? Everyone remember Toys R Us, the store, right? What was it like when your children would go there, you bring them to Toys R Us? What would happen if they saw a new toy? Anybody like to share what would happen? Yes?
They want it.
They want it, okay. So do they just look at it, or what do they do with it?
In a way, they could look at it all day. They could build a tantrum. They could not build a tantrum.
Right.
It depends on, the intensity
Yeah, so,
that's built up in the child for that toy.
right, there could be some intensity about the toy, right, because they're super interested in this new toy, like this toy, what can this toy do? Like, do they start to push the buttons, like you're in the aisle and all of a sudden the duck is quacking, or something's buzzing, right? They have to know all the features of the toy, every aspect, turn it inside out, wiggle it around, throw it around, whatever it is when they get a new toy. They want to know what all the bells and whistles of the toy are, right? Now, what if there's a boring feature, just like a really dull one? You probably all remember that yourselves when you were so excited about getting a new toy. It looked great on the commercial, and then you get it, you're like, oh, this is a dud, right? Do you go back to that toy? Probably not. It's boring, it's dull, or the feature is dull. We don't want to go there again. So you might all be guessing where I'm going with this, right? For our children, we are their most entertaining toy. We have, as adults, lots of bells, lots of whistles, lots of different emotions, lots of different ways of saying things, lots of different behaviors. And some of the things we do might be kind of dull, right? Our responses might be kind of flat or unanimated. So our children are like, that's not too interesting, right? But if they're looking for connection, which is what all children want, they want connection with their parents, their caregivers, their teachers, they want that connection. So they're going to push whatever buttons, pull whatever levers, right, to get that kind of attention and intensity that they would like. And as you could guess, a more intense child is looking for that more intense connection. So they're going to push whatever button they will need to do to get that from us, because that's what they want. They want our attention, our love, our concern, right? And I don't want anyone here feeling at all like, oh, wow, I really blew it as a parent or a caregiver or an educator, because you haven't. You're doing the best that you can do with the tools that you've been given. So this is just something new to kind of look at, a new approach. So let's move on a little bit here and talk about how we choose our energy. This goes back to that concept of intensity within ourselves as well, in the way that we react to our children. So if you can imagine, someone is going to give you either a $5 bill or a $100 bill. How many people here would take the $5 bill? Nobody, right? We're gonna go for that $100 bill. Why wouldn't you want the $100 bill, right? Same with our children. Why go with the $5 response or connection with our parent or caregiver if we could get the $100 response, right? But as a parent, as a caregiver, as an educator, we can decide what kind of energy we want to give back, where we want to put our intensity as an adult, where we want to put our focus. Do we want to energize the negative behaviors, or do we want to energize the positive behaviors? So to become sort of wise with our budget and see where we want to put our big bucks, where we want to put our energy. And maybe those things that we really don't want to see kind of grow in our children, we get that low energy, just the $5 maybe, or no dollars for that one. Anyone have any questions so far? Anything I've mentioned? Okay. Our first stand, absolutely no. So very firm stand. Absolutely no, $0 towards negativity. I refuse to energize negativity. I will not reward negativity with my energy, connection, or relationship. So what does that mean? So think about it. Usually most of the time when our children are doing what they need to be doing or what's expected of them or anticipated from them, but okay, they're doing what's expected of them, they're doing just fine. We're kind of low key maybe, low energy perhaps, right? But the moment that they break a rule or do something that we know they're not supposed to do or push one of our buttons, our energy level starts to go up. They get a response from us, whether it's the tone of our voice or the stand of our body, or they get us up off the couch or they get us off the phone in that moment and they get our attention, right? That would be feeding the negativity. So we don't want to feed that. We want to focus our energy, our $100 bills, for when our children are doing the things that we would like to see grow in them. Those moments of greatness that every one of our children have. And I know, especially for some of us, maybe our children might be pushing those buttons a lot, and it might seem as though it's very difficult to find those moments of greatness sometimes, but they are there. And it's not about just waiting for the moments of greatness, and I'll get into that in a moment when we get into the next stand, about how we can energize and not wait for the perfect moment to give our child that absolute yes. But we want to just take a step back with this absolute no, kind of take our own pulse and say, okay, where am I putting my energy? Am I inadvertently, with my connection with my child, just by acknowledging them, talking to them, and giving them that relationship, that connection in that moment, and a reward. And it's not like all this is planned out. You know, our children aren't sitting there plotting this. It's just natural way humans behave, right? Why do we want those $5 bills when we could have those $100 bills? So I'm just gonna have us all watch this video right now.
gotta get grabbing it.
How cute is that, right? He is absolutely adorable. Only thing is that this is not a representation of the nurtured heart approach. What this is a representation of ignoring. So ignoring, right? So definitely the parents are not energizing the negative, right? So they're definitely not energizing the negative. But how does he know when to stop? When in terms of getting that connection, right? Does he know whether crying or stopping to cry gets connection? It's kind of confusing, right? So he's not getting connection whether he's crying or he's not crying, right? So how do we go about that without ignoring? How do we ignore the negative, but now we're going to get to the next stand, right? The absolutely yes, in a moment. Ignoring. So why is it counterproductive? Back to what I had just mentioned, it's confusing, right? Our child doesn't know what is okay then, because whether they're doing something positively or negatively, they're not getting a response from us. They're getting $0, right? So they don't know which way is up, and they don't know what to do. What it can also do when we ignore, and this is the advice of many professionals, and let me tell you, I in the past have done this myself because this is all I knew to tell parents to do with negative behavior or any kind of behavior that wasn't acceptable for them, is to just continue ignoring, right? To continue ignoring. But when we have an intense child, the only thing that says to the intense child is, oop, I'm gonna up my game. I am going to take this to the next level because I know at some point my parent, my caregiver, my teacher has to break. They're going to snap at some point and I'm going to get them. I'm going to get them and they're going to give me that attention. So, and they know this toy very well. They know our buttons, our whistles, our bells, our levers. They know what to push to get the response. So this could actually just escalate a situation. Now, the thing with the nurtured heart approach too is that for those of you that have more than one child and multiple children at home, as you would guess, if you're only doing this approach with one of your children, what do you think is going to happen to the other one? They're going to be like, yeah. So I have to misbehave to get my parent or my caregiver's attention. So their negative behaviors might start to show, right, to get your attention. So you want to do this with all of your children, so not just the one that's intense. Video games. Our children love video games. This generation lives for video games, it seems like, right? And so many times parents will say, they don't have energy to do schoolwork. They don't have energy to do their homework. They're too tired to go to school. They don't feel like taking their music lesson or their art lesson or going to the game. But they could sit in front of that video game screen for hours and hours and be motivated and have energy and enthusiasm about it. So what the nurtured heart approach does is takes this concept and looked at video games and said, well, what is it about video games that's so enticing for children that really gets their attention, gets them so motivated to do their best? Well, if we look at video games, it's all about mastery, right? Getting to the next level. You'll hear your children say, I need to level up another minute, I'm about to level up, no. And so there are rewards. And so there's awards they can win, and medals they could win, or money they could win, or weapons they could win, or skins they can win. There's all kinds of things they could get that show their mastery. Because our children want to succeed, they want to get better, they want to excel, they want to be winners, right? They want that greatness. They recognize that they do have that in there somewhere. The video games really bring that out for them. And now another thing about video games too, besides the fact that there's lots of enthusiasm for when they do something well, like with the level up, there's maybe some song that goes on or some kind of special screen or the character changes or something like that. But also If they don't win in the video game, right, if they lose a life, it's kind of uneventful. It's usually just like a dee, and they're out for a second, and then they can get back in the game. Not too much energy when they break a rule or make a mistake, because they can choose to break a rule, right? But then usually there's a consequence in the video game. But when they're doing well, boy, is there a lot of enthusiasm in that game and a lot to see and hear. The incentives are always strong and predictable. So our children know when they play a video game, if this happens, the result is that. If this happens, the result is that. It never changes. It's always predictable. Those bells and whistles that go off with success, the rules don't change. So the video game doesn't have a bad day, and it doesn't say, well, today I'm having a stressful day, so I'll let you slide, right? The video game still is gonna have the same consequence or same reward, regardless. There's no change. And many times as parents, we might feel like, okay, I'll give my child another chance, because we feel like it's coming from a place of compassion, but what it does is it confuses our children. So like the video game, we want those consequences to be consistent and clear, or the game to be predictable, so to speak. And then also too, in video games, they're not out of the video game for 24 hours or a week or a month, right? They're right back in. They're right back in seconds, if not a minute. It's never too long that they're allowed to get back in. And the reason that they're so excited about getting back into the video game is because that game is so exciting, so enthralling, just makes them feel so excited that they can succeed, that it keeps their attention wanting to level up. So to that, absolutely yes. Stand number 2. I relentlessly create and energize positivity and success. I energize and nurture firsthand experiences of success. So this is not about just giving those kinds of comments like, good job, way to go, that a girl, that a boy, right? It's more than that. And it's also authentic. So our children know when we're not being honest, right? When we're just trying to be nice, just give them a compliment, try to make them feel better. This absolutely, yes, it's not about trying to make our children feel better. It's about trying to have them recognize their inner greatness and build their inner wealth. It's about observing them in what they are doing right. They can't argue with that. They all do things right. There's nobody on this planet who's doing everything wrong. So there are things they're doing right. And to just state that to say to them and tell them that you recognize that they're doing this and what it speaks about them as a person. So just as I was saying earlier, to your greatness for being here today to learn more strategies in developing your parenting. You could have decided not to be here today. It was raining, you could have chosen not to come here, but you chose to come here today. And you're all paying attention right now in this moment, which really says to me that you are curious and you want to expand your knowledge, and you are dedicated to your children. So what I have given you right now is a recognition. It's pretty much an absolutely yes, right? And your children do things right also. It's just stating what it is that they're doing and recognizing that for them. And the other training that's out there, and again, I'll direct you at the end on how to get that, goes into more depth about how to actually do that with your children. So new ways of being positive. It's not about catching them being good, because they are being good throughout the day. It's recognizing those behaviors. We want to use those rich sort of words. We want to tell them when they're being courteous, or when they're being polite, or when they're being generous, or when they're being patient. We want to identify the behavior. We want to tell them, look, I noticed that you're sitting there for a long time, and I know it's not easy to sit there and pay attention for that long. Because with intense children, something like good job just means, it may not mean too much. And sometimes when children always hear negative things, especially an intense child, how wonderful is it to start to know that their good behaviors, quote unquote, those positive behaviors are being recognized. And this allows children to recognize their greatness when we point it out to them as adults. So here I have a video of an educator using the stand number 1 in her classroom, and then I'm going to ask the group, all of you, a few questions after we watch this video for a moment.
What would you like to use, Merlin?
Cat.
A cat? Someone in tribe 2, what would you like to use, Brianna? A dog? Boys and girls, you just work so well together right there. Thank you for not fighting and feuding over what we were going to choose in that group. In tribe 4, what would you like to choose? Angela. A frog. Boys and girls, put your eyes on me before we do our vote. Let's just take a moment right here to say, during that process, no one fussed, no one was fighting, no one was saying, pick me, I want my answers. You could have been doing all of those things. You could have been fussing and feuding and yelling about what you wanted. But you were respectful to each of your classmates in your tribe. You know what that shows? It shows discipline. Exactly, Brianna. Thank you, Haley. And it shows teamwork. It shows you are disciplined first graders and you have teamwork. Kiss your brains for that.
Wasn't that amazing? And I just wanted to make sure I shared that educator's name. Wanda Thorne is her name. And she is a Nurtured Heart Approach trainer. She does this at her school. 95% of the teachers at her school are trained in the Nurtured Heart Approach. So I'm going to ask you all right now a few questions. What did you see? What did you notice happening there?
Interested.
What was that?
They seemed interested.
The students seemed interested, right? She had their attention. Anyone, anything else that you saw? Yes.
A lot of positives where she was recognizing that they were working together. And she pointed it out to each, using their name directly, saying, thank you, Brianna. You were letting them put their own input as far as you picked the dog, picked the couch, and nobody laughed at it. So she's got great communication going on. And they all work great together.
Right, she's got this great, right.
She's got the rapport. So the kids will act accordingly.
Right, so the teacher, she established the rapport with the students, right, that relationship.
So they trust her.
Right, they trust her, and she recognizes each of their specific, right, and each one of them specifically.
Right.
And it goes right to the behavior. They can't argue it, right, because it's a fact. This is what is happening here. And it's the positive. So thank you so much, thank you. So what is not happening? Anyone notice what's not happening here in the classroom?
One of the boy was actually visually, but instead of calling him out, she praised the behavior that she would like to see. And so he was, he could listen and be like, oh, everyone else is doing that, and I wasn't, instead of being called upon and being embarrassed in front of the whole class.
Right, excellent point, right. So he was a little fidgety, and children can be fidgety, right? But instead of energizing the negative and saying, stop being fidgety or sit still, right? The moment that he did something that needed to be recognized, that was an absolute yes. She pointed that out and pointed out his greatness in that moment as well, right? So not energizing the negative. Great point. Yes. Anyone, anything else that did not happen?
They were all involved, engaged.
Yes.
She had them. She had them going.
She had them all engaged and going, right? They weren't throwing pencils, they weren't running around the classroom, they weren't ripping up papers, right?
She didn't say, you, Jonathan, she said, in this class, we don't do fussiness. As a whole.
Right, as a
She
whole.
didn't point them out and make him feel less than.
It's-
And he got right back on focus.
Exactly. So you got right back
So
on
you also
task
taught the other
for
kids, if I
success.
decide to do that, I'm gonna have to stop this game for a minute and talk about the positives.
Yeah, so you make a good point there too, because it only took her a few seconds to sort of throw out those recognitions, recognize those, energize the positives, right? It only took a few seconds. Now imagine how long it takes if everything unravels, right? And the children start to get fidgety or get up and start moving around or not listening or throwing something. That takes more than 5 to 10 seconds. That could take 5 to 10 minutes to redirect. And same thing at home with our children. When we think about how quick energizing the positive, recognizing the positive could only take maybe a few seconds for us to say that, versus what could happen if they try to get our energy in a different way, and it could take 5, 10, 30 minutes to sort of de-escalate a situation with our child. And what does it say about who they are as a person growing in greatness? What does it say about the confidence, right?
Self-esteem is all there.
Right,
It's
building
what
the,
they need.
yes,
You gotta start young and keep going.
right, so we want to build that confidence,
Absolutely.
that sense of self-esteem, that strength,
Trust, openness.
right? All those positive qualities in our child, right? We want to grow that in them so that they have that inner wealth that they could draw from in adulthood, because that's what it's about. We want them to grow into happy, successful adults.
It was something that I read or something, and it's like a child isn't meant to be molded. They're actually meant to be unfolded.
Oh, that's a beautiful
You know,
statement,
so
yes.
it's like
A child isn't meant to be molded but
They're
unfolded.
authentic, so
Right.
through the reinforcement of, not exactly what you're talking about.
Thank you, yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, wonderful point, right? Because that's what Nurtured Heart speaks to. The intense child, it's not saying there's something wrong with your child because they're intense. It's about channeling that intensity in a way that recognizes and encourages the future growth of their greatness and building their self-confidence and trust in themselves and in their self-efficacy. So thank you so much. Thank you everyone for answering the questions. So the foundations, right? So we've got the first two, absolutely no, absolutely yes. These are the foundations. No energy to negativity or positives have the impact intended, right? So if we energize the negatives, right? When we want to say something positive, if we're still giving too much energy to the negatives, our attention drawn to when our children don't listen, misbehave, don't do what's expected, then they're still getting more energy from us. They're getting the $100 bills for the negativity. So when we do give them an authentic recognition, authentic positivity, an absolute yes, it may not have, you have $5, it's worth $5 to them, because that negative response they're getting from us is still at the $100 level. So it's that self-reflection of ourselves, about being aware of where we're putting our energy. So that is the foundation. So that it does have to go in that order. We do have to decrease the energy we're giving for the negativity. So absolutely no to negativity. We want to create a rich time in with our children. So what do I mean by that? So when we give them a consequence, it's usually a timeout of some sort. So a timeout from a privilege or a timeout from some sort of engagement in something. Now, if you can imagine, if the timeout is from something they don't like to do, are they too motivated to get back in? No, right? So we want to make the time in something that's very rich and enticing for them. Just like in the video games, when the video game has the bells and whistles and everything, and they're excelling and they're leveling up, when they lose that life, it's like, oh, I can't wait to get back in the game. This time I could do better. I know I could do better, because the game is just so much more fascinating than not being in the game. It's that much more enriching. So the same thing about their relationship with us, that it is that much more rich than having that time out from whatever the activity is that they have. And that's how limit setting can be effective then, right? So to the third stand, absolutely clear. I set and enforce clear limits and clear consequences in an unenergized way. I will always provide a true consequence. Video game logic. Back to that again. Our rules with our children need to be clear, concise, predictable. They need to know what the expectations are. The rules can't change, the consequences can't change. If we're having a bad day, we don't want to be different for them than if we're having a good day. They need to know what to expect. They need to know the rules of the game so that they're clear and they know what behaviors are expected of them and what's not expected of them. But without the stands 1 and 2, 3 can't happen, right? 2 energetic reasons why timeouts fail, and this is what I had mentioned. The timeout can fail because if the time in with us or whatever the activity is, isn't as exciting as the time out. If the time out is a $100 bill and the time in is only a $5 bill, why go back in, right? So the timeout will have no consequence. The punishment will have no consequence. We want them to feel as though the time in is really much richer. And just like in video games, that timeout is not long and punitive. It's quick. It's like a reset. In the further trainings, in the longer trainings for the Nurture Heart approach, it gets into exactly what a reset is, how to do it, how to make it quick and concise. It's not about being punitive. It's about helping the child just self-regulate and get back into the game of life, so to speak. Basketball. How many of you out here play basketball, watch basketball? Okay, I see a couple hands, right? Are the rules of the game clear in basketball? Okay. What is it about a toe in or out? What is that about?
And the toes in during, if you just go back here, you gotta be out for the ball here.
Okay, the toe has to be out to throw the ball, right? Yeah, it's a very clear rule. Everybody knows this rule. There's not one person there at the game who does not know this rule, and everyone knows the consequence of this rule. There's not a little bit of, oh, just maybe a little toe in out, it's a little fuzzy. Right, it's either in or it's either out. Everybody knows it. Now, the game itself of basketball is exciting, so the players really don't want to get a time out of the game, right? Because they're missing out. So there's that energy. It's wonderful to be in the game, right? So they don't want to be out. They want to follow the rules because they want to be in. They want to be in the game. And there's sometimes, though, it does happen when a referee or somebody can make a call and it could be a little unclear. And then sort of what happens with that.
It's nothing or something.
Right. And then nobody's happy.
And it's
Right.
like they get a warning. Happens again.
Right. So then, yeah. And then the fans start to get a little riled up and the players start to get a little aggressive, right? Because the rules are now no longer clear. What just happened to those clear rules, right? So we want to keep our rules clear, concise, consistent. And the beauty of this approach is no one's expected to be perfect because no one can be, right? And sometimes the most intense children try the hardest to be perfect, but they fall short. And when they fall short, it is devastating. So why even bother, maybe, right? Just keep doing what I'm doing. But by having this sort of strategy in place of absolutely no, absolutely yes, absolutely clear, energizing the positive that we're seeing in our child, making their interactions with us rich and vibrant, and letting them know that when there is a consequence, it's quick, it's just a reset, you're back in the game of life, we're not punishing you here, you're just resetting yourself, and you can come back in and you can do better this time. this heavy weight of needing to be perfect is lifted off of their shoulders, and yours as parents as well. Children do not awaken by the fear of punishment. They awaken to their greatness. Howard Glacier. No one has ever developed a consequence out there that is so perfect that no child has ever broken it, right? It doesn't exist, right? Punishment does not work. Transformation works. So no longer is anything gained by breaking the rules with the children, right? Back to the basketball game. What's the fun of sitting out on the bench, right? You want to be in the game. So we take away that sense, right? They want to not break the rules because they want to be in the game. Big responses, the big energy we give them is only for the positives that we're recognizing. And now breaking a rule is only a true consequence, not a payoff, because we're not giving them $100 bills for breaking the rules. They get zero. And what is the nurtured heart approach? It's a set of strategies for helping children and adults use their intensity in successful ways to awaken their greatness. It's building inner wealth. And to your greatness as parents, that you may have the tools now to build and develop the greatness within your own children. And there is, for those of you who'd like to look online, get more information, as I mentioned, this is just a brief overview. There is a 6-hour course that's out there in the Nurtured Heart approach, but there are some free lessons, more information at www.nurturedheartinstitute.com. And then there's also, for anybody who's interested in becoming a Nurtured Heart approach trainer, there's information you could gather on there as well to get that type of certification. So now I'd just like to open it up to any questions that anyone might have. Yes.
Can you give a hard example of the child that was throwing a tantrum?
Mm-hmm.
What would be the absolutely no response that was appropriate?
All right, so the absolutely no was they were doing that. They weren't energizing the negative, right? They weren't giving attention to the tantrum or the yelling. But where they could have come in is the moment that the little boy stopped crying, swooped in there like, yay, all right, come on, we're doing this now. So energize the positive. The positive was to stop the tantrum, right? So the second, right? And this is just an overview because the other, what's online, you get more information of actually how to get into that, into those kinds of recognitions actively with your children. Mm-hmm. Good question, thanks. Anyone else, any questions? Yes.
So what if children are teenagers and you miss the boat on this opportunity now? We've been tilted.
So the question was, what if you have teenagers and you've missed the boat, right?
Yeah, can you go back and are there any suggestions on how to
It's not too late. This approach works with everybody. You have not messed up at all, So it's not too late with teenagers, of course, because the recognitions are authentic. It's authentic, right? It's coming from you, it's genuine, it's authentic. You're giving them facts, right? And you can start energizing those positives in them and starting to give less energy to the negative. It's never too late, never too late. Thank you for asking. Well, my teenagers are now in their 20s, but I know those days. I know them well. Anyone else, any questions?
I was always taught to really feel energized.
Right.
So is that kind of not what they're saying here?
Right, so ignore the behavior, so it's partially right? We want to ignore the behavior, right? We're not ignoring the child, but when does the child know? This is, I guess, the point of the Nurtured Heart approach. When does the child know that they're doing what's expected, right? So that's when we energize that. That's that extra step of energizing the positive instead of just ignoring the negative. Yeah, to make it clear for them so it's not confusing. But thank you, good question too, thanks. Yes,
What about being separating couple with two children, $5, she's $100. I work for not involved as much, so when they're with me, you try to overcompensate that, but then you overcompensate the negative as well, so it's kind of like fighting each other. So how would you do that, something like that?
and I hear your challenge, and you're not alone in that. That's a challenge for many parents who have to co-parent, or even sometimes people who are married and are parenting together and have very different styles. You can only do the best you could do for yourself with your relationship with your child. And it's always up to the other parent to kind of come to that moment of recognition that perhaps they may need to make some changes. But if you wanted to talk some more at the end, I'm here to chat. Anyone else, any other questions, or?
To me, this seems like this takes practice. Like, you're not gonna go home and just automatically be able to pick up what you're gonna say, the positives. I mean, it's gonna take time. I mean, as when I'm a classroom teacher a while ago, it's hard to, at first, try to pick up the positives that students are doing. What that teacher did on the stream, I mean, she had a lot of practice, she was an expert. And it's you're gonna be like, oh, what do I say now? I saw something good, or how do I, you don't wanna just say, like you said, good job, and you're really specific and you're really consistent, it seems like, so it's really gonna take a lot of practice, so don't beat yourself up, but you'll get there.
Right, excellent point, right. To your own greatness as well, and building your own inner wealth, and to have that compassion for yourselves as well, and recognizing, energizing your own positives in yourself and not focusing on those times that maybe we feel like we felt short in some way. Because right, it's a different way of being with our children. It's a new way of relating. And right, it does take some practice and a skill set to build up.
Don't think it's just not working.
Right.
It's not good.
Right, so the message is not to give up. The kind of message we send our children, right? Not to give up. Yeah. Thank you so much for pointing that out. That's important. Yes, thank you. Anyone else? Any other questions or thoughts? Yes.
Just from a perspective, is it a good idea perhaps to get the children's buy-in on this, put them into this approach before handing it out?
Yeah, you don't need to give them insight into what you're doing. You could just start doing it, and then you could see if you notice a shift or a change. And I'm sure that you'll start to notice a different response in some way from your children, but you don't need to tell them that this is what you're doing. Yeah. They'll feel it, they'll feel the shift. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think to me it sounds a lot like basically teaching or treating the children as human beings in a sense that like that the video, the toddler was throwing himself on the floor and he was crying, clearly distressed. If your friend came up to you and was clearly distressed, you wouldn't simply walk away, right? So it's kind of like, I guess, just being empathetic. And I think a lot of people would think that a toddler was trying to manipulate the situation, but I feel like children know at that age that they communicate with crying. So if the grown-up is no longer in the room, he knows that there's no one there for me to communicate to. So I stop crying. So the moment I see my dad again, I'm going to start crying because I need to communicate something with him. And so, anyways, what I get from this, basically like try to see what's behind the behavior, and a lot of times I think students respond to a lot of it.
Exactly, don't we all want to be loved and accepted, right? And so it's a very good point about treating our children with respect, the way we would want others to treat us, and the way we would treat others as well. But a very important point too, maybe not to take our children's behavior so personally, because they don't have the tools, even as teenagers, to communicate maybe effectively what it is that they need, but their behaviors are what tell us, like, hey, we have to tune into something here, that there's a need here that our child has. So excellent point.
A lot of kids do feel that, I can't be in their mind, but that negative attention is attention. So
Exactly.
that's what they're, you know, rolling around, and he's looking, I got nothing. And he looks for a guy, and he goes over. So it's basically, you know, to me, I don't know if it's a fit, but I would just say the dollars prevention.
Yes, and that's it,
You know,
and the
And
comment is,
is
right,
gonna get a response. But the
absolutely.
different one with this.
Yeah, so the comment, right, is that children want attention, right? Really want attention.
Favorite color, what they love to do, you know, with, you know, their aspirations, be part of that.
Right,
You know, and
right, be a part of their growth, their lives, build their inner wealth, their inner
if they grow up like
greatness.
spiders, that's how it goes.
That's it, that's our child, we don't need to change them, right?
No.
Celebrate them.
Absolutely, the year to be
Absolutely.
celebrated, so are we.
Yes, they're here to be celebrated, so are we.
Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, and I appreciate you and everyone here today. I'm just looking at the time, and I know we're getting to 8 o'clock. Were there one more question, any other questions? Or if not, we'll wrap up for today. Sure.
My children were older, but they weren't teenagers that long ago. And I know when you first start this, you're probably gonna say something to them, and they're gonna say, Mom, or Dad, whoever says it, why are you being so weird?
Exactly.
But, you know, and then you just, they think you're weird anyway. So, you know, like, sure, what? That's what I am, I'm weird, you know? But I guess over time, they will get to see that that's you, a new you, because it's not the way you've acted in the past, you know? And you probably have that way, but not as often maybe, because like the video game idea, you're supposed to be doing it more and more often, like it's more of a common response rather than a once in a while response.
Because we want to be
Yeah.
consistent, right?
Yeah.
And our children might be like, hey, wait a minute, there's a shift. But it's also a good way of modeling for them that at any point in our lives, we could change. Our past doesn't dictate our future. That's not who we have to be, right? Like we can grow into our inner greatness or build our inner wealth even as adults. It's never too late. All right, so thank you. Definitely not.
I actually have a 26-year-old, a 23-year-old, a 6-year-old, 5-year-old, and 3.5-year-old.
Yeah, so you are on your toes. Yeah. So you've got a lot of greatness there at home. All
Well,
right.
my older one is, you know, established
Just wonderful.
herself, and Megan as well. Which
All right, so thank you, everyone. And again, to your greatness, your children's greatness, you're welcome.